Welcome back to Financial Spectrum. For the first half of today's program, we're going to be talking about some of the trends that are happening in the workplace in terms of career building, workforce trends, societal trends, and sector trends. And joining us now is Dr. Tracey Wilen. She's a prominent thought leader on the impact of technology on society, work, and careers. She's been a scholar at Stanford University and has held leadership positions at Apple, Hewlett-Packard, Cisco, and the Apollo Group. She's authored 11 books, and her latest, which you can still get, is still in print, and you get it through one of the online retailers. The newest book is Employed for Life, 21st Century Career Trends. She's appeared on all the major television and radio networks, and so it's a privilege to have join us Dr. Tracey Wilen. Hi, Tracey.
Oh, hi, and Happy New Year.
Oh, thank you. You too. Hey, it's a turbulent system out there in terms of let's say the economic climate, the weather around Wall Street, if you will. So it's kind of nice to take a little bit of a departure from that. Second half of the program, we're going to talk much more about the impact of what's happening in Davos and the State of the Union address and all these things on the marketplace. But let's talk about careers. Over the weekend, I don't know where it was printed or who did the survey, but there was a report out in the news, and you probably have better handle on this than I, that says the Millennials have now overtaken the baby boomers as being the most largest, and we know it's most influential demographic group in the United States. When did that take place, and what are the implications?
Well, and that is interesting. The Millennials are about 83 million in population, and the baby boomers are about 77 million in population, and Generation X, which is the generation in between the two, is about 65 million.
Yeah.
So the boomers the millennials are by far the largest generation. They're also the most educated and the most technical, and I think they have the most opportunities in 2015. Pew Research has noted that people are reaching the age of 65 now at the rate of 10,000 per day.
Yeah.
And for many, that means retirement, and who's going to fill the slots? If the Generation X population is small, the pipeline's small, an opportunity for millennials.
Well, more than ever before, 65 no longer represents a natural retirement age. Many of the baby boomers, especially following the financial crisis of 6 years ago, they're looking back and saying, I can't afford to retire, so I have to keep going at my current career or do something else for a few years to supplement until I try to max out Social Security. So it's a very different environment now, and our economic system has created wealth through the growth of financial assets, but it hasn't necessarily created new jobs. And so it's still a challenge for millennials to find a good position that's got a lot of growth potential.
Well, to your point, one of the trends I am seeing, and this is a lot driven by both millennials and boomers, is that the corporation is no longer the destination.
Yeah.
It's a stop in your career. And it might be a 20-year stop or a 30-year stop, but as we live, to 100 and our kids to 120, our work span will be 50 to 70 years. So you will have many stops along the way, and it might be part-time, it might be a stint in a corporation, but I think people have to have the mindset now that it's going to be an adventure and look a little bit like the old game Chutes and Ladders.
Yeah. Chutes and Ladders did have those slides, and that's challenging to think about. Boomers come out of a sort of a society where their parents, for the most part, were rewarded for loyalty. They stuck with one corporation. There may or may not have been a pension by the time they retired, but the point is loyalty was rewarded, and staying with one group or one, even just one career was the way to approach your financial life, your work life. But the boomers started transition on that, and by the time the 80s and 90s came around, there was no longer necessarily a stigma attached to the resume that showed a variety of steps or stops along the way. How are millennials treating that? To what extent do they see flexibility and a change, not necessarily a bad thing?
Oh, I think millennials have embraced the opportunities of the philosophy that they will be mobile, they will be moving through different cycles in their jobs. The boomers, yes, loyalty to a company was highly valued. The parking space, the corner office, the 9-to-5 day was valued. Today, contribution is key.
Yeah.
So what you produce for a company and what you gain from the company in terms of experience and skills is now more important than being the loyal worker, as you mentioned. And even recruiters today will tell you that an ideal stop is about 5 to 7 years in a position.
Mm-hmm.
Could be lateral moves, where you actually have metrics on yourself that you can show that you actually learned something, but also contributed in some way to the bottom line.
Now, from that standpoint, I would think employers want to see somebody that doesn't take 10 years to get some momentum. They want to see a fast starter, somebody who can come in and contribute right away if they're only going to be able to hold them for 5 to 7 years.
Well, a contribution is pretty important from day one, and this is what I think a lot of job hunters don't understand, that companies are not hiring you for what you want to do. They're hiring you for what you can do. It's sort of like you have a backache, you don't, and the dentist, you don't go to a dentist to fix the backache. You go to somebody who actually is a surgeon or medically experienced with back. So, and so the philosophy is the same with companies. I don't want someone who wants to be in marketing. If you're in manufacturing, I want you in manufacturing.
Yeah. And tell us, let's take a step backwards. Folks, we're chatting with Dr. Tracey Wilen, and you want to learn more about what Dr. Tracey Wilen does, you can go to TraceyWilen.com. That's Wilen. Tracey, tell us about your organization, your speaking engagements, and what it is that you're doing these days.
Sure. So my background is actually live in Silicon Valley, and so I've worked for many of the prominent Silicon Valley firms in all levels of management and executive roles. And while doing that, I was a researcher, a visiting scholar at Stanford for over 10 years, looking at how technology has changed the landscape of society, work, education, and careers. And through that process, I published 11 books on different aspects: leadership, women, career development, different international business. And then today, I pretty much am a full-time global speaker, and I travel to all parts of the world, speaking on topics that I research. And so the three for this year is the future of work and skills, women in gender and generation driving new forms of leadership, and then how to stay employed for life, which now I tag as take a career selfie.
Yeah.
It's easier for people to understand.
There you go. Yeah. Now, from looking back at that concept of a career for life, I think, again, generational differences in semantics. It used to be that a career for life meant find the company you can stick with and be loyal, rise up the ladder. But the politics in the workplace, whose coattails you're riding, all that's changed, hasn't it?
Well, it really has, and I think what people need to engage with is that you're in a transaction now with companies. It's not your family. You're contributing, expertise, skills, and productivity. The company in exchange is giving you a salary, perhaps benefits, and opportunities to develop. They may be giving you internal opportunities through lateral moves and cross-functional teams. And that's your option to be able to take and use and for your own personal development. But in reality is you're probably going to outlive many companies. So you need to start thinking about your own personal career development plan. And I just call it your career adventure.
Now, in past, again, my generation, I'm a boomer, and we used to call that just having a parachute at all times. Being ready for when the company, if you're going to outlive the company, or there's going to be such kind of, the kind of changes we've seen happen so frequently where a company's bought out by another one and they cut the jobs, they cut the positions, consolidate and save on costs, that you have to always be ready for what the next move might be. There's always got to be a plan B. How is it different now? Is it not just a parachute, but where you're much more proactive about the process?
That's right, and that's a very good point. What I encourage people to do is take a one sheet of paper. I remember CEOs showing me this years ago. Map out across the top your age in decades, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, except I would encourage you to go up to 110. On the left-hand side, write down education, work experience, social, all of the aspects of your life, finance, and then drop in a couple of your key goals into the grid. I want to be retired by what age? I want to have a family at what age? I want to be married at what age? Put in a couple of those big milestones and then figure out the interaction of all the facets of your life. How are you going to be retired at 65 if that's your goal? What does that mean for you in terms of work, income, job moves? You want to be a vice president by age 50. well, what do you have to do in your 20s, 30s, 40s, even in school, to be able to get you to those points? So I think it's not about relying on the company and making a plan B if this company changes. It's more of, what do I want? What's the goal that I have for myself at what age, and how am I going to maneuver my career and my life to get to what I define as my personal happiness?
Yeah. So that's part of the process of what you talk about as a career selfie. And folks, again, we're chatting with Dr. Tracey Wilen, and I want to keep pointing people toward this. You go to TraceyWilen.com, and you can find a lot of the tools and more about what Tracey does. Tracey, where are the hottest places for millennials to try to find a career boost? In other words, not just a job, but something where they can be hired with or without a college degree. Give us some of the dynamics of the workplace right now, where you see the best opportunities.
Well, I'm going to give you two sets. One is just some societal trends that have just occurred that are what I call kind of fun, but driven in a digital world, and a millennial would really enjoy it. The three is we've become an on-demand society, so there's been a lot of services that have developed to support us. Two is we are a sharing economy, and there's been a lot of products and services now to support that. And three, I would even look at things like the reinvention of food over and over again. So these are more of societal trends that can open up doors for very savvy young people who are interested in something a little different. On the traditional side, security, healthcare, and what I call STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, which is really computer science and biotechnology, are, I think, the big hits for the future.
Okay, yeah. And when you say technology, certainly having spent a lot of your career in the Silicon Valley, being very familiar with technology and the impact now it has on careers and the workplace, what do you see over the next few years? In what ways will millennials' skill set and mindset toward technology be an edge up on the older generation?
I think it is an edge up. I think technology creates efficiency and simplicity. And I think a lot of us have been groomed and worked in worlds that had a lot of process, that had a lot of infrastructure, and did solve problems.
Yeah.
But today you can resolve these problems in a much more simplified way by using technology. And I'll just give you a case in point. I was visiting with IBM in New York. They have a supercomputer with artificial intelligence called Watson. Now they can put into Watson all of the data information about cancer. Try to, push a button, right, so to speak, have analytics.
So to speak, yeah.
See if we can solve cancer 10 years sooner than all of the medical minds.
Wow.
Right? So that's profound. Can we do these large leaps in advancements using technology? And I think our younger generation understands technology more than some of the older generations.
But the millennials, boomers have, for a couple of, maybe 15 to 20 years, a couple of decades now, ridiculed the millennials as being the group that's, there's 5 kids in the car that are all texting each other while the car is going down a highway. They're very mobile savvy, but at the same time they seem mobile dependent. Where do you find balance in that, where they're actually applying technology rather than letting technology kind of apply them?
Yeah, and that's a good point, because millennials will say, those boomers, they sit in those conference rooms all day yakking about nothing and wasting time, right? So there's always two sides to what's your preferred mode of communication. That's how I look at it. What's the distribution channel that you're using for communication, and what makes sense for you? I'll just give you a clear example. Look at Uber and Lyft. This is an amazing service that develops. It's part on demand and part sharing. And it is simplified riding, right? So I don't even have to own a car anymore, because it's become incredibly efficient for me to use an app, call up a car on Uber or Lyft, and get a ride for really inexpensive. And at the same time, I have met many people who have created jobs and personal career options for themselves because they've become Uber and Lyft drivers. That's the synergy there of saying we're taking technology, we're simplifying an infrastructure, owning a car, parking a car, maintenance of a car, and we're simplifying a process and a cost. by using simple technology, the app, and saving people a lot of time and a lot of money. And I think it's just brilliant when you can put together technology and help people in some way.
Yeah. The change is challenging. Of course, there's been a lot written about what's happened to the taxi industry and the unions that run those and the cities that rely on sort of a certain amount of coordination and all that. And then you get this new technology that's mobile in nature. It's kind of snuck up on society in so many ways. It's second nature to the millennials. I don't mean keep making a generational thing, but the point is the political and infrastructure aspects of this haven't caught up to what the technology is dictating. And so the change is just at a pace that's very challenging, I think, to everybody. And you talk about societal trends. There's a lot of implications of this that is yet to be worked out.
Yes, and I think to my earlier point is previous generations have created a lot of infrastructure process, and that is slowly being undone, and it's very challenging because you're right, the technology systems are outpacing the political systems. I mean, another example is just something like drones.
Yeah, right,
you know,
absolutely.
It's a huge business, and it can offer a lot of jobs, but the FAA, it's creating a lot of pressure on the system to say, how do we deal with this new technology? How do we, it can bring a lot of good. It can help firefighters, it can help farmers, it can help scientists, it can do a lot of good, but how do we address it?
Yeah. And then there's other aspects when you talk about societal change. Privacy and security are being redefined on a daily basis. It seems as though there's an evolution in terms of society's expectation of privacy and expectation of security. I would think those people that are focused on careers in those two channels would have, several lifetimes worth of work to do.
Yeah, I say that, that sadly security is going to be a safe bet for people and jobs. And I bucket it into three areas. One is, you mentioned, the cybersecurity, hacking, protecting our data, protecting our networks. Mm-hmm. We need people, and that will continue to grow because it's not retailers anymore and banks. It's all kinds of businesses.
Absolutely.
Number two is physical security and protection, whether it's protecting schools, events, gas lines, or water reserves.
Frightening, yeah.
It is. And then the third one is terrorism, which is in the news now every single day.
Yeah.
And the job list that I see on the job boards for terrorism-related jobs is very large, and it's very different than in the past, from bomb detection, nuclear experts, biological and chemical weapon experts, forensic data, you name it. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of jobs. So I think that, sadly, is a safe bet for the future if you're looking for a new sector.
What comes to mind with what you're talking about, though, let's draw an analogy here. In the healthcare sector, with the regulations on healthcare through the Affordable Care Act, and for that matter, litigation, how it's reshaped healthcare in so many ways, there are a lot of people that just cannot afford to go on and get their MD or DO degrees. They go and they get they become physical therapists. I have a daughter that did that. I have a son-in-law. Her husband is a doctor in pharmacology. Less expensive, but they're still in healthcare. And then there's those people that are becoming physician's assistants rather than going through the entire process. It's becoming less attractive to become a doctor with the demands on it, the costs of it, and everything else. What about in the when you talk about terrorism-related jobs? I think in the past, CIA, FBI, and those people in those at that level, almost all of them had to have a law degree. But people can't afford to do that anymore. Where's the education coming to equip these people to combat terrorism?
Yeah, so it depends on what you pick. So an individual, actually, I was just interviewing, started in blue collar, no education, and now is in security protecting nuclear plants.
Wow.
And the training actually comes from the companies and organizations because it's quite specialized.
Okay, in-house. Yeah.
In-house. So you have to pass different tests, and you have to do self-study. But it was an opportunity. And I've met a number of people who are looking at how can I transfer into sectors that might have more longevity. I think healthcare is a very good example. Healthcare, you can start in with minimal high school or certifications and then build. and say, do I want to move into, I met a gentleman a few weeks ago whose whole job in healthcare is to photograph people's eyes. That's it.
Wow.
Didn't require any kind of education, has to be skilled and trained in an area, but the point is there's many specialty areas and many opportunities for people that is not just the doctor anymore. And I think we automatically jump to doctor, nurse, without thinking about physical therapists, like you said, occupational therapists, aides. And as the boomers get older, they're really becoming two groups. We have the active group, and then we have the inactive group. And the active group is driving new technologies, like wearable technology. I want preventative health. But the inactive group is saying, I don't know if I want to go to an old age home anymore.
Yeah.
I want to bring in services to my house, and that opens up new opportunities as
Sure.
well.
Is that really the new blue collar in that sense, where you don't necessarily have to have a college or graduate degree, but you can build up through skill sets focusing on a particular area, with regard to technology and aptitude? And in other words, we're moving away from the agricultural society, the Iron Belt society, and into one where there's a brand new version of blue collar?
Well, there's some people call it gray collar.
Okay. There you
the
go.
overlap of the blue collar and white collar and technology. Manufacturing is often referred to that you actually need to know manufacturing, but you also need to understand robotics and 3D printing.
Yeah.
And so it is a combination. And people do get certified and can build skills and experience in these areas. And not every job requires an education. Education is good. I'll never turn that down because I think it's an opportunity.
Fascinating. And Tracey, I assume you would point people toward your website, TraceyWilen.com?
Yes, and my Twitter is @TraceyWilen, and I'm on Facebook as Dr. Tracey Wilen, LinkedIn, and Pinterest.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much. So appreciate your time today. Absolutely fascinating. And so appreciate the work and what you do, what you bring to us in terms of your expertise. Thanks for spending the time with us today.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tracey. Listeners, stick around because Bloomberg's Small Business Report is coming here at the bottom of the hour. Back in just a moment